psychological treatments for people with psychosis, and I've been involved in quite a few large-scale clinical trials. And in fact, I'm involved in 2 clinical trials which are underway at this moment, but I'll mention those a little bit at the end. In the last 10 years, I suppose, I've become very interested in the possibility of integrating biological and psychological approaches with environmental data to get a better understanding about the causal pathways to psychosis. And in fact, what I'll argue is it's actually vital that we integrate data from these 3 different types of data. I've spent a huge amount of effort to try and get funding to do this research, which has not always paid off, I think it's fair to say. So to some extent, this is going to be some musings about research which I have not yet been able to carry out, but still hope to, despite my, getting on a bit these days. So the outline is I'm going to briefly talk about the concept of causality, because it seems to me that the concept of causality is absolutely crucial in psychopathology, but it's one which is generally not thought about. And in fact, well, that's probably not fair to say it's not thought about, but should we say that some of the thinking about it is fairly naive. And I'm going to go on then to talk about how a causal understanding of psychosis could be developed if we integrate information from these 3 different types: genes, environmental determinants, psychological functioning, and brain structure and function. I'm not going to say that much about my own research, in as much as I will mention it a little bit as it kind of illustrates the points. Causation. It's a funny thing, causation. One of the things about cause is that we use the term every day in our lives, and yet it seems to cover quite a lot of different things. So we, for example, would say malaria is caused by a parasite, the air crash was caused by pilot error, or the bridge collapsed because an overweight lorry travelled over it. In each of these cases, they seem to be quite different. Now, one we've got some kind of biological process, and another we've got some kind of human error, and another we've got something failing, which seems quite different. So it's quite difficult to pin down actually what we mean by cause. And don't worry, I'm not going to dwell on the philosophy of this very much, but this person obviously is central to this whole debate about cause, David Hume, who basically, Scottish philosopher who count among the pigeons really, by explaining why it's very difficult to pin down what we mean by cause. One of the points which Hume makes is that actually, although in subsequent years we have worried ourselves silly about trying to identify what's a cause and what's not a cause, actually in everyday life we use the concept of causality all the time. In fact, we probably couldn't get up in the morning without actually making causal inferences. So I make a causal inference when I brush my teeth, which is that if I don't brush my teeth, then my gums will get diseased and my teeth will fall out, for example. He defined cause in 2 ways, actually, which does create some confusion. He talks about constant conjunction, which is when one effect constantly follows a previous phenomenon. So when one thing follows another, then A is said to be the cause of B, if it does it with sufficient regularity. But he also said that so we could say that A causes B if had A not occurred, B did not occur. And this is the idea of a counterfactual, thinking about what wouldn't have happened if A hadn't occurred. And there's been centuries worth of debate really about how those 2 ideas, constant conjunction and counterfactuals, relate to each other. A problem in terms of the constant conjunction idea is that we see lots of constant conjunctions in everyday life and in science, which we know or we intuit has nothing to do with causality whatsoever. There's a fantastic website and a book which goes with it by a chap called Tyler Vegan, and it's called Spurious Correlations. And what Vegan does is he mines data to drag out examples of correlations which are spurious. So here we've got a slide which shows between 1999 and 2009 the NASA space budget for the United States, and also the number of people who in the United States who committed suicide by hanging, strangulation, or suffocation. And you can see it's an almost perfect fit. And in fact, the correlation coefficient is apparently 0.99. However, I think most of us would not expect the suicide rate in the United States to jump up once more just because NASA launches a Mars mission. That's obviously not going to happen. So this is a spurious correlation. Now, this has led a lot of people in statistics to sort of argue that we should be very worried about talking about correlations at all. And in fact, we should almost ban the term. This was the approach taken by Carl Pearson, the inventor of the Pearson correlation coefficient. And he argued that in science, we can never talk about cause, we can only talk about associations. But that, I think, has changed a lot over the last 10 years, in particular due to the contribution of this person. He's called Judea Pearl. I don't know if any of you've heard of Judea Pearl. He is definitely a rocket scientist. Well, he's almost literally one, actually. I mean, he started as an engineer and a computer scientist, but then became a philosopher and mathematician. And he's made enormous contributions to the understanding of causality. Some people would say revolutionary contributions. But I suppose one of his most important points, in a way, is a simple one, which is that if we're talking about spurious correlations, the implication is that some correlations are not spurious. And therefore, in a sense, the whole idea of spurious correlation points us to the need to find principled ways of identifying those associations which are genuinely causal. I'll come back to Judea Pearl in a minute. He's an extraordinary person. He's also I guess he's a tragic person because his son was Daniel Pearl, who was a famous victim of jihadis in Pakistan. His son was kidnapped by jihadis and beheaded in public. So a kind of man who's had a very difficult life in many ways.